Homework, procrastination, not organized, oppositional. Does this sound like your child? So sometimes we get a much longer description of what's been going on, but this parent just gives us a list of 4 things: homework, procrastination, not organized, oppositional. This child is 13, and well, some of it could be teenagerhood. It's unlikely that that is the entire cause for this, and why it would suddenly start. I don't think it probably did suddenly start when this child turned 13, although I swear with my own boys, it was exactly the day they turned 12 and a half when they made that transition to being a teenager. Anyway, and I've had other parents tell me the same thing. But the point about this is that if you have a child who has difficulty getting their homework done, who seems to procrastinate, to put things off, to not be organized, those are big clues to some weaknesses in a set of cognitive skills that are called executive functions. And I hear a lot these days about executive functioning, and teachers and parents both are talking about executive functioning because we all want to have the outcomes that are associated with good executive functioning. That is, to be organized, to get our work done, to be able to stay on track, to keep track of our things, to be able to think ahead and plan ahead, to be able to shift gears when something doesn't go right. All of those are examples of executive functioning. And what is underneath executive functioning are 3 mental processes that are called executive functions. And I think it's really important to draw this distinction. Obviously, they're very closely connected, but executive functions are the mental processes that our brains use to help all that executive functioning happen. And so explaining to somebody how to do their homework, or telling someone that they shouldn't procrastinate, or even helping a child get organized one afternoon after school may not stick. And the next day it's likely to be disorganized, procrastinating, and all the rest. It's also likely in this case that this child has weaknesses in other cognitive skills, maybe in memory, maybe in processing speed, maybe in some of their reasoning skills, because basically kids are not lazy. I mean, kids can be lazy, but when they have things to do, the most common reason for procrastination or and not being organized about something is that it's really hard. It's really challenging. It's something I don't want to do. I know I can procrastinate sewing a button onto a blouse for weeks because I don't like to do that. Other things I'm very good about not procrastinating about. But there are those few things, and I bet you all have those things that you're just not as anxious to do. And it's not because they're you just are really lazy in any sense. You're probably very industrious, like most kids are. You can get a lot of things done, but that one key thing that's really difficult. So if kids know that homework is going to be real drudgery, it's going to really tax them, it's going to stress them, it's going to be difficult, they will tend to put it off. And that is very normal and very human. We're not going to get over that by just saying, well, suck it up. That's not the right answer. And it's certainly not the right answer to say, stop being lazy, stop procrastinating. There's a reason that they're procrastinating, and we need to address that. sort of reminds me a little bit of a colleague the other day who told me about their grandson whose teacher in school, this is a much younger child, asked the parent to explain to him the importance of reading. This is a 7-year-old, by the way. Well, 7-year-olds aren't trying to be difficult any more than 8-year-olds or 9-year-olds. And in fact, reading was challenging for him, and it was difficult. He was having difficulty keeping his place in the, he understood everything, but he had difficulty. So, explaining to him the importance of reading was not what was required. I also want to just go to that last point for a while, which is about being oppositional. And those kinds of things are very typically symptomatic of a weakness in a cognitive skill. I remember one family that we worked with where the mother called up one day distraught because the school had called and told her that her daughter, they were concerned that she had oppositional defiant disorder. Well, this little girl was a rule follower. She always wanted to do what was right. She tried very hard. And it was devastating to this mother to hear this. Well, it turned out, as we dug in and as we realized what was going on, that her daughter had slow processing speed. And so when the teacher would ask this child to do something, it would take her longer than her classmates to understand what she was being asked to do. It just took her a little longer to process it. It's not that she didn't want to do it. It's not that she was refusing to do it. It's simply that it took her longer to process. And to this teacher, that looked like ODD. It wasn't. And so we have a real risk of mislabeling. This child may be oppositional. We don't know for sure because we would want to have him assessed by an appropriate professional. But very likely, it is not about being oppositional. It's about the fact that learning is hard for this child. Learning is difficult. It takes him more mental energy than his peers to do what seem to be simple tasks. Trying to stay organized is not something that it takes extraordinary effort for that to be going on. And it's difficult and it's not fun. And so, of course, when we were faced with tasks that are difficult and challenging and unpleasant, we have a tendency to say, I'd rather not do that today. Thanks, but, I'm not going to do that. And, when children are young, we can, sort of force them to do things they don't necessarily want to do. By the time they're 13, they're starting to become a little bit more independent. They're starting to think for themselves. They're starting to build that autonomy, which is important. It's critical. Then we really need to say, okay, we're not going to just force the issue. What we're going to have to do is really, and we do for younger children too. The important thing was to help that young child, that little girl, develop her processing speed. For this student, this 13-year-old, might be processing speed, might be working memory, might be cognitive flexibility, might be all kinds of things. Until we understand where those cognitive stumbling blocks are, we're going to be really ineffective at helping him. The workarounds that are typically done, we'll give you a homework checklist, or we will just set a time and a timer to try to resolve the procrastination issue. We will give you color-coded folders and, have a weekly clean out of your backpack. All of those are workarounds. All of those sometimes they're called accommodations, but basically what those strategies is working around the underlying weakness in cognitive skills rather than addressing it. It is the traditional approach in schools and lots of places because people don't know how cognitive skills can be developed, and they can to an extraordinary extent. And so the kinds of issues and the kinds of conflict, and that's another thing, especially when kids get to this age, there's plenty of basis for conflict in those teenage years. And if you complicate it with weaker cognitive skills. So for example, cognitive flexibility could be at play here. That's how we look at things from different perspectives. The opposite is sometimes people think of rigid thinking. I'm stuck in a particular. Well, that can look like oppositional, and that can be the basis for plenty of conflict. I see it one way, my child sees it another way. And unless we both have that skill of cognitive flexibility, we are not going to be able to come together. We're going to continue to have a battle and think the other person is wrong. Well, we got to think a little bit more flexibly. We got to figure out what's going on and why people have different points of view. But shifting those mental gears takes energy, especially if we don't have those skills. So this is a great example: homework, procrastination, not organized, oppositional, of a bunch of parental concerns that very likely have cognitive skills and cognitive weaknesses at their base. There's a parent training session that we have that explains cognitive skills. It goes into some more depth on some of these skills and how they operate and all that kind of thing, and how they can be developed. And I'll put a link to that underneath this video. Have a great day.